All kids out of the pool.
Don't hold anything back now!
I wish there was a way to know you're in the good old days before you've actually left them.
It goes without saying that I am a huge fan of the physical side of lost content, whether it's related to merchandise prototypes for characters that were never made for the market, or props like animatronics and giveaway items that feel like they're so rare the owners might never come forward. In recent years, searching for physical items has sort of become its own niche, and it seems like the more I look into topics that fall under this category, the more I find intriguing stories to share with you all. Today I have gathered up a little bit of everything to discuss and look into, from figures that were cancelled before their release, to one-of-one props that someone must own. Let's talk about some items that are still a mystery. The first topic I want to start the video with is one that I talked about before, but now we have an update for it. And wow, do I think this is actually more lost after hearing about this update than I did before having the knowledge of it. By far, it was one of the most fascinating topics from my Lost Halloween animatronic video from last October, and since it's spooky season now, I wanted to come back to it. So in that video, I discussed a lost animatronic known as Rocking Clown, which was the fan name given to this animatronic that was allegedly seen at Spirit Halloween in 2004. According to a post from HalloweenForum.com from around this same time, a user lists some of the props that their local store got, and describes one of them as a life-size rocking psycho clown, hence where the name Rocking Clown came from. In the thread, other users ask for photos of this, and state that they haven't seen this prop at all in their stores, which led to its elusiveness in modern times. Nobody in the Halloween or prop communities has seen a Rocking Clown, and nobody even knows what company made it or if it had a wide release. Maybe it was only available in certain parts of the country. Well, the most common theory about it is that Rocking Clown wasn't actually lost at all, and rather it was actually a misidentified or mistaken prop by the user who posted about it, and that whatever Rocking Clown really was is a prop that was more common or well known, not a new creation. In my original video, I did speculate on which company I believed it could have been from, and the other animatronics that it could have been linked to. But since then, both YouTube user SpookyGuy444 and this comment from user Kiand have informed me the mystery has partially been solved. It turns out that the earlier theory about it having a small release and being available only locally was kinda correct, because it was only available at one store, and there's only one of these in existence. Mike Kroll, a former designer for Spirit Halloween's store displays, confirmed that Rocking Clown was an exclusive animatronic that was made for one location and sold for charity. So basically what that means is that we were just extremely lucky to have this eyewitness account to prove that Rocking Clown was made at all. If it hadn't been for this post, we never would have heard about it. Of course, we're still missing any photo that shows him in action, and who knows if the owner of this piece still has it in the first place. Which makes you wonder if there are any other lost animatronics out there that do exist, but nobody has talked about them so we don't know they're actually lost. And actually, Mike also confirmed there were other rocking creatures similar to the clown that were made, so yes, a whole set of them does exist, though they're just as lost as the clown is. My only question though is, why did the user claim that the clown was $400 if this was a charity auction type thing? Maybe at that point in the auction it was up to $400, but I think the wording of this post just really threw us off. It sounds like it was a retail prop, and no mention of it being made for a purpose is discussed here. Now that I know this is actually not a widely released retail item, I kinda wanna see it even more. But I won't hold my breath for that one, especially with how big the Halloween community is and how old the prop is. It feels unlikely for it to come forward, in my opinion. Perhaps one of the biggest lost merchandise mysteries involves one of the earliest series of video game toys to ever exist. I'm pretty sure I've talked about this company a couple times in passing before, but for the full lore experience, let's dive into the world of Joyride Studios. If you've seen their Sonic Adventure 2 Sonic or Shadow figure, then you already know this company, as Joyride was one of the earliest companies to mass-release video game toys at retail stores, having begun the line back in 2002. At the time, they were releasing their toys under the GamePro label, which included mascot characters like Sonic and Monkey Ball to more niche stuff like Cell Damage and Jet Set Radio. Then, not long after, Nintendo exclusive figures were released under the Nintendo Power label, and included Luigi's Mansion and Metroid. Both GamePro and Nintendo Power lines ran for a couple years, until around 2003, when Joyride discontinued these products. To this day, I'm still impressed by the fact that this was the first toy line to incorporate both a Mario and Sonic figure under one roof, and the character variety is something we have yet to see replicated to this day. But over the duration of their existence, many prototype figures have been seen and documented before. Most notably, at some of the early toy fairs, we got really nice photos of prototype figures, including a Samus that is based on her design from the beta of Metroid Prime, before it was changed to a more retro look. But then, all the way at the end of the timeline, are even more prototypes, except these ones are documented in a much smaller way. This magazine page is the only living source showing Fox from Star Fox Adventures, and the other showing Mario from Mario Sunshine. I remember first coming across this page decades ago, then having lost it for quite a while, before doing research and tracking it down again only a few years ago. Both of these are insane to see, especially since they differ so much from their final versions. Well, Fox differs the most because he actually wasn't released at all. He was cancelled before being made, and this photo is the only proof that he even existed at all. But to me, what I am most fascinated with is Mario. Until I found this page again, I thought for years I had misremembered its existence, and was simply confusing him with another figure. I love the fuller appearance the character has in this sculpt, and the likeness of the facial expression is great too. At first I wasn't sure what artwork this was based on, until it hit me. This is supposed to be a recreation of the game box. However, as you might be aware, while this figure did end up releasing at retail stores, he was reworked entirely and doesn't resemble the original at all. So you might be asking yourself, why was the figure changed and what happened to the original? Well, as for why the figure was changed, that was because of Nintendo. It's pretty common knowledge that Nintendo is very particular about their merchandising, and according to some industry contacts I've reached out to over the years, Nintendo just didn't want the Sunshine figure to look like that. They insisted that Joyride resculpt it and use this artwork instead. As a kid, I was always confused as to why there was no green Yoshi in the game when he was seen in this artwork, and now we have a figure depicting the game in a rather inaccurate way. But as for where it is, I think it's more than likely we'll never see it again. While I don't have a definite answer as to what happened to it, again, according to my contacts, Nintendo required that prototypes for this line be sent to their offices for approval, where they likely stayed and were kept. Nobody I've talked to has this or has seen it since it was made, so my best guess is that whoever was handling licensing at the time at Nintendo might have walked off with it, if it didn't end up in the trash before that. I have contacted some Nintendo licensing people in the past, but nobody seems to have any info on this. This was over 20 years ago, at a time when preservation and collecting in general was just not where it is now. In some of my more recent videos, I've made it more clear that I'm a huge fan of Naruto ever since it aired on Cartoon Network, and got back into collecting the series merchandise a few years ago. My favorite line is the SH Figuarts, but one that must be discussed when talking about Naruto figures is the original US line by Mattel, released alongside the dub on TV. These figures are quite literally action figures, often with gimmicky features and below average sculpts. Still, I find a lot of charm in them, and was trying to get a lot of the characters I never had as a kid. Unfortunately, that adventure was rather short-lived, because the price of loose figures are not exactly cheap, and most of the ones I find are either scraped up or smell like smoke. But when I was doing my initial research on the different waves and characters in them, I discovered some unreleased characters that would have been so cool to have. From what I remember, each wave of figures were released loosely with the TV episodes, so the toys featured characters and jutsu moves as the series progressed. Well, during the later part of the Chunin exam arc, Mattel released a wave of characters that were designed around these action features. For example, Orochimaru could launch his sword from his mouth, and Jiraiya could rotate his Rasengan and launch it. But there were 3 figures from this wave on the back of the box that never actually came out. These include Lightning Blade Kakashi, Claw Attack Gaara, and Power Punch Naruto. While no information is given here about what they do, I'm guessing Kakashi could rotate his lightning blade similar to Jiraiya's mechanism. Gaara probably had a grabbing feature, as indicated by hinged joints in his claw, and Naruto likely had a joint in his torso that allowed him to punch forward if pulled back. And that's a pretty good guess because in the last wave of figures that were released, there is a Rasengan Naruto figure that has nearly the same action feature as this. So it seems likely that Power Punch Naruto was specifically reworked into the Rasengan one, and the final figure actually includes both slogans on the package. But as far as I know, Kakashi and Gaara never materialized as anything else. I always thought this was particularly strange for Kakashi, as he only received one main figure in this entire line, and it came out at the very beginning. If you do a little looking around for these figures though, there is one photo that exists from Toy Fair, either 2006 or 2007, that shows the entire line as it was originally designed. These are likely the resin masters and have never shown up again outside of this photo. However, if you check sold eBay listings from many years ago, you can actually find test shots of Kakashi that were sold, and a couple years ago, I came across the first ever test shot of Gaara. These were done in plastic at the factory where they were made, so it seems like they were planning on making them before deciding to cancel them. And from this angle, we can even see a button coming from his back that likely would have enabled his claw to open and shut. While I think this wave is the most interesting of the prototype figures, the final wave was also supposed to contain Jirobo, which was never released. Test shots of him were sold on eBay years ago as well. I'm not sure what his action feature would have been, but the back card photo places him on a slab, so maybe he could have interacted with the ground like in the anime. And then there are the other resin prototypes from the earlier waves that were seen at Toy Fair when the line was originally launching. If you take a really close look at the figures, you'll notice some differences, like Rock Lee's bandages being much thinner, and Haku's mirrors being more transparent than the final released ones. But aside from just looking better and the paint being better, the sculpts look mostly the same. Still, I would love to come across these someday, or know where they ended up. Mattel is one of those big companies that is not really easy to talk to, so it's likely they were either trashed or the materials were recycled for other figures, which is not uncommon in the toy industry, and it's something I would expect a big company like Mattel to do anyway. Next is a somewhat bizarre mystery that just sort of appeared one day, even though the topic is actually from all the way back in 1994. You gotta wonder how exactly this was just not known about for as long as it was. And then you gotta wonder why it even exists in the first place. I don't even remember what I was doing that led me to this search result, but a few years ago I came across images of what were described as Ren and Stimpy animatronics. At first glance you'd almost assume they were puppets or something manual, given the way they move and how their bottoms are blocked off by the structure they're standing in. I was so curious about these and figured, even if I don't figure out where they came from, the photos at least must have been taken from a larger source. So with a simple Google search with the information provided in the photos, I was able to find the material it came from. The photos were taken from a full recording of the animatronics in action by a videographer. According to the post, these were stationed at the FAO Schwarz store in New York in 1994. This actually makes a lot of sense because around this time, their video game on the Super Nintendo was out, and explains a lot of the reason for their existence. This display and the animatronics were made to promote the game, and if you watch the video, you can also hear the characters beckon to the shoppers to come over and give it a try. The game itself can be seen running on the TV screens in this clip, so basically this is just an elaborate marketing piece. But that doesn't solve every question about these guys, because yeah, it makes sense they were there to sell the game, but a lot of curiosities remain. Firstly, the question that most people ask when they see them is why do they look so unsettling? Like they just give off that creepypasta animatronic vibe, not only with the way they move around and how Ren's eyes look, but for their inaccurate appearance too. Ren is completely missing both of his ears, along with his nose, and Stimpy's fur is gray and matted. I'm not sure if the fur coloring is just the result of the low quality of the video, but without a doubt, Ren is supposed to have ears. I initially thought maybe this was a cost-saving measure, like pretending his ears were falling behind him in a way where you couldn't see them, like in some scenes of the cartoon. But then a comment on the YouTube upload of the video points out that maybe the animatronic suffered issues at an earlier point in time, and were not properly maintained or taken care of. This is mind-blowing to suggest that the only documentation we have of them took place after something happened, so we might never see what their intended appearance was like if this theory is indeed true. And secondly, is that nobody knows who made them. I did try searching a little harder for more information, thinking it had been posted somewhere over the years, but as of now, nobody has any more idea about them than they did years ago. Though while looking around, I did find an article from the Tampa Bay Times that mentions a set being in a store within the area, whereas the original video is stated to be from New York. This suggests that more than one set of them exists, which is cool. This also includes the question of what happened to them, which cannot be answered right now. If the disrepair theory is true, then in my opinion it's more than likely they were scrapped. But if they simply just look like this on purpose, then maybe they're in a storage place or packed away somewhere. Though I don't know if Nickelodeon really values this kind of thing at all, so maybe they got rid of them anyway. So I'm going to say unless there was a reason for these two to be saved, we might never see them again outside of this single video. The final topic of the video is one that is a little personal to me, because I was actually there to experience it. Kinda. It's not something that I ran into many years after it happened, and rather I saw it when it was up. However, I didn't have the money at the time for it, so I could only watch as someone else won a prize so legendary, you could basically call yourself the #1 ranked assassin with it. Back in 2011, you probably all remember the earthquake and tsunami that impacted Japan, and was pretty much reported on around the world. I remember being in a high school computer class at the time, not realizing the severity of it until I got home later. And as a result of how bad it really was, there were a lot of charity and donation organizations set up to raise money for relief efforts. And since I was very heavily into buying video game merchandise at the time, these two paths converged into one. In the spring of that year, the video game industry in Japan came together for a fundraiser called Play for Japan. Many developers, companies, and industry professionals were auctioning off one-of-a-kind, rare, special pieces, of which the profits would go directly to this effort. From what I remember, there was a huge variety of different items that went up for sale, with autographed stuff being one of the most popular. However, there was one item that I saw and wanted so badly, I knew I would never get the opportunity to buy it again. I'm a big fan of No More Heroes in the modern day, but even back in 2011, I had wanted to play the games after coming across them online, so I definitely knew about the series. And it was around this time that series creator, Suda51, contributed an item from his collection for this cause. That item was the original Bloodberry sword, used by Travis Touchdown in the game, that was created in real life during development of No More Heroes 1. I found the listing archived from WorthPoint, and it confirms that the sword itself has both lighting and sound effects, is 1:1 scale, and was also used at promotional events to advertise both of the games. Just seeing Suda51 hold it in these photos looks so cool, and it was mind-blowing to admire all those years ago. It's the kind of thing as a collector back then I never would have even thought existed, much less be put up for sale. It even included a custom-made case that it could be stored in, and would ship worldwide, so even bidders outside of Japan could win it. But as you could have guessed, I was still in high school like I said, and had no money. Not to mention this was a charity auction, so I'm sure people were bidding on it higher than maybe they normally would have. And clearly it must have attracted big fans of the series, even back then, because I recall the final selling price being somewhere around $5,000 US. I couldn't find the actual archive of that, so I might be wrong, but that's the number that sticks out in my head. But even though I knew there was no way I was getting this back in the day, I thought for sure someday I would at least get another chance to see in-hand photos of it, or hear from the person that won. But currently, we have zero idea what happened to it. I've kept an eye out for it over all these years, and it's just never reappeared. There is really not a lot of information about it online either, besides reports of the auction itself. And even nowadays, that takes quite a bit of digging to pull up, considering how obscure and forgotten its existence is. Even if the winner did post about it back in the day, I'm sure it would have been on some old deleted thread that you couldn't even find anymore. But who knows if it's even exchanged hands by this point, what its market value would be, or if it's still in good shape. I'd like to think that whoever won it did keep it safe, because even if they lost interest in the prop or needed extra money, It's something you'd want to keep in good shape, and not exactly an item that would just get thrown into a basement or something. For all we know though, it could have even stayed in Japan. But still, it's a cool artifact and a somewhat documented piece of memorabilia that we know is out there somewhere. And who knows, maybe some bar owner has it as a decoration piece and nobody who goes there even knows what it is. Kinda like how that incredibly rare Wolfman Zap animatronic makes appearances in that parade without a second thought. And with that said, that's the latest batch of lost physical items for us to find. It feels like the mysteries get more and more complicated as we go, and believe it or not, I still have enough topics for another couple of videos like this. If you have other topic suggestions for those videos, feel free to leave them in the comments and I'll check them out. But for now, let's keep our eyes open for any of this to show up.
A true ninja always stays on top of their training, just as a true viewer stays up to date with the latest videos. So, why not grab another cup of green tea and watch some more? I'd stick around this digital dimension myself, but I gotta get back to my teammates. See you in the next chapter.